Well, Kobe was one of my players. I coached him on 3 teams. He was my leader.
Kobe Bryant never played a minute of college basketball. He went straight from high school right to the NBA, but that doesn't mean his influence wasn't felt all over the NCAA and the ACC. Coach Mike Krzyzewski worked with Kobe on multiple Olympic teams, and this week his Blue Devils honored Kobe with a moment of silence and special T-shirts before their game. Of course, Duke's players weren't the only ones feeling the giant loss of Kobe Bryant this week. There are more than 400 men's and women's basketball players across the ACC, and you can bet each one of them took at least a little bit of inspiration from Kobe growing up. Many of today's college basketball players weren't really alive to see the beginning of Kobe's career, but they might have watched his 81-point performance as they picked up a basketball for the first time. And they saw him win back-to-back NBA Finals MVPs about the time they were joining their first teams. They saw him drop 60 in his final game in the league around the time when they were getting ready to go into high school. And as they went off to college, they saw Kobe show what it means to be a hard-working, responsible adult. Kobe might not have played a minute of college basketball, but he will be missed by every single team in the ACC. All right, now we're halfway through, roughly thereabouts, the ACC conference schedule, and we're going to cover all of the action here on Chase for the Championship. And the biggest game of this week, it might be Florida State's first loss since the beginning of December. I know it's a loss, but still, stay with me here. WMBB's Courtney Mims is covering the Seminoles and their L to UVA. Courtney?
Well, it was a great run, but Florida State's 10-game win streak is over. The men's basketball team fell to Virginia on the road Tuesday night, 61-56. Well, it was tight throughout this one up until the final 2 minutes when Virginia went on an 8-0 run to take the lead and, take the win. Florida State did not shoot or rebound well in this one. Virginia dominated them on the boards 36-23. But the only reason the Noles were actually kept in this one was turnovers. The Hoos turned the ball over 17 times compared to FSU's 7 in the game. The only Seminole to score in double figures was Devin Vassell. He carried the team with 17 points and 6 rebounds. The Noles now sit tied for second in the ACC with Duke behind 9-1 Louisville. The Cardinals' one loss was to Florida State, though. The Noles will stay on the road and actually stay in Virginia for this weekend. They take on Virginia Tech on Saturday. Reporting on Florida State, I'm Courtney Mims.
Thank you, Courtney. Florida State going to look to start another win streak when they travel up to Virginia Tech this Saturday. That one's at 4, and then it's back home to host UNC. That one is on Monday, tips off at 7. And the Cavaliers have plenty of time to rest up after their big win over Florida State. They don't play again till Wednesday when they host Clemson at 7. WRIC's Natalie Calabate heard from Cavs head coach Tony Bennett about his team's big upset. Natalie?
What a week for the Virginia Cavaliers. UVA followed up on Sunday's overtime win over Wake Forest by beating number 5 Florida State on Tuesday night. Braxton Key's layup gave the Cavaliers the lead for good at Wake Forest. Amamadi Diakite scored a key basket with 1:05 left to give UVA the 65-63 victory. Virginia coach Tony Bennett thought the Cavaliers and Demon Deacons raised their games in the final minutes.
There were some really good moments, for both teams. Guys making plays. They were without Childress, which is a big loss for them. We were without Cody. There were certainly good moments on both teams. And as I said, there were certainly some head-scratcher moments where you just scratch your head and say, well, that was interesting on both teams. That's part of teams, continuing to try to find themselves and grow through different experiences.
Diakite scored 16 points to go with 7 rebounds, and Kihei Clark filled the stat sheet with 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. That set up Tuesday's showdown with the 5th-ranked Seminoles. UVA fell behind 8-0 early, but answered with a 10-2 run. The rest of the game was back and forth, but Virginia finished on an 8-0 run to earn the 61-56 win. Diakite had another big night with 19 points, 9 rebounds. Clark scored 15 and was perfect at the free throw line.
It comes down to making plays. You gotta make your free throws. You gotta make a play. Kihei made some wonderful plays. Offensively, you gotta bang a shot. You gotta make a block. You gotta do some things. It's about at that point. Sometimes the offense matters to an extent, but it comes down to making plays.
The Cavaliers will have the weekend off before hosting Clemson next Wednesday. Covering Virginia, I'm Natalie Calabat.
Great stuff as always there. Thank you, Natalie. And the Louisville Cardinals are now on a 7-game winning streak, and that's got them sitting alone at the top of the ACC standings. WEHT's Randall Parmley is covering the red-hot Redbirds. Randall?
The 6th-ranked Louisville Cardinals picked up another big conference road win last night and kept their spot atop the conference standings with a win at Boston College. That was surprisingly close for a while. The Cards led by only 2 at the half, but they eventually put away BC, winning 86-69. And what a night it was for Jordan Nwora. The Eagles just could not slow him down. Nwora finished with a season-high 37 points, knocking down 7 triples. The Louisville defense, solid once again, holding Boston College to 40% shooting for the game, and they absolutely dominated the boards, out-rebounding BC 43-29. Louisville is now 18-3, and more importantly, they're 9-1 in the ACC. Up next for the Cards, it's a Saturday afternoon showdown at NC State. Covering the Louisville Cardinals, I'm Randall Parmley.
Thank you, Randall. That showdown in Raleigh against the Wolfpack starts at 2 on Saturday. Then the Cardinals head back home to the KFC Yum Center to take on Wake Forest on Wednesday at 9. Boston College will also head down to Central North Carolina this weekend. They'll be at the Dean Dome trying to take down UNC on Saturday at 6. Then they'll look to pull the upset against Duke at home on Tuesday. That one tips off at 7. And after back-to-back losses a couple of weeks ago, Duke is back to their winning ways. The Blue Devils won their 2nd in a row when Pitt came to Cameron Indoor on Tuesday, but the final score wasn't the biggest story in Durham after the Cameron Crazies started a chant about Pitt head coach Jeff Capel. Of course, he used to play and coach at Duke. Blue Devils head coach Mike Krzyzewski went over and yelled at the Cameron Crazies to stop it, pounding his chest, saying he's one of us. After the game, he said he misunderstood their chant of Capel sit with us. On the court, the Blue Devils led most of the way and went on to win 69-67. Vernon Carey Jr. led the way for Duke with 26 points, 13 rebounds, pulling a double-double. Pitt's Au'Diese Toney had a big game for the Panthers. He had 27, and Pitt made things interesting late in that second half, cutting the Blue Devil lead to just 2. But Duke regrouped and closed the game on an 11-2 run and grabbed the W.
We just stopped being strong, like we were hoping shots would go in. Sometimes when you get tired, you're not, I don't know, it's that ebb and flow, like it's what makes human beings. Sometimes the other guy's just better. And then you hope that at a timeout, we called a little punch action and we executed, got it to Vernon, and then we executed. I think we had an 11-2 run. We really executed well, and but that's just going to happen. Other teams aren't going to lie down and die, and thank goodness we did not in those last 4 minutes.
No, they could definitely come looking for Duke at Cameron for sure. After 3 straight games at Cameron Indoor Stadium, Duke now heads out on the road. The Blue Devils visit Syracuse on Saturday night at 8, and then they'll be back in the Northeast on Tuesday night, taking on Boston College. That one is at 7. Jeff Capel and Pitt now return home to face Miami. That one tips off on Sunday at noon, and then they'll head west to visit Notre Dame on Wednesday at 6:30. And after a slow start to the season here, Syracuse is now up to 4th place in the ACC, and they got a big one coming up this weekend when Duke visits the Carrier Dome. Covering the Orange and joining us now live is WSYR Steve Infanti. And Steve, let's get right to this weekend, man. How can Syracuse try and stop this Blue Devil team?
Well, it's a great question. I think you look at what Syracuse has done well this year. The blueprint for success for this team has really been threefold. Number 1, shoot the 3 awfully well. Number 2, compete on the glass. And thirdly, stay out of foul trouble. The shoot the 3 well goes without saying, right? Buddy Boeheim, the best shooter statistically in the ACC. Elijah Hughes, top 5 in that category. Compete on the glass. I think that's going to be a big concern for Syracuse on Saturday. We know Duke is statistically the 2nd best rebounding team in the conference. Syracuse has struggled on the glass. They're just 3-7 this year when they lose the rebounding battle. I don't think Syracuse needs to win the rebounding battle on Saturday to win this game, but they have to be competitive. Keep it within single digits. They lost the rebounding battle by 29 against Penn State earlier this season down at the Barclays Center, got blown out for good reason. They need to compete on the glass against the Blue Devils, and they got to stay out of foul trouble because they are not a deep team. They're 1-4 this season when Marek Dolezaj fouls out of games. We just saw that on Tuesday at Clemson. He fouled out. Barama Sidibe fouled out. Syracuse only goes about 7 deep. So if they have guys in foul trouble and Vernon Carey can do that to you, I think that's going to be a problem for the Orange on Saturday.
Oh, that's good points, all. Not a formula for success there on the Qs. And the Orange, they've seen a lot of balance all across the box score so far this season. Are there any players that we should be keeping our eyes on this Saturday night?
Well, I'm sure you already know about Buddy Boeheim and Elijah Hughes, and they're the 2 leading scorers for this team. There's 2 other guys that I want you to keep your eye on. I'm really intrigued by this point guard matchup between Joe Girard and Tre Jones, because we saw last year that when Jones was able to get after the Syracuse guards, he changes the complexion of the game defensively. He disrupted SU's offense. Joe Girard is just a freshman. He's an accomplished freshman, scored 4,700 career points in high school at Glens Falls, won a state title. He's the all-time leading scorer in high school history here in New York State. He's been very good this year. He had no turnovers in 34 minutes against Clemson. He had 1 turnover the game before that against Pittsburgh. It's going to be awfully tough, though, for him to have only 1 or 2 turnovers against Tre Jones. So I'm curious to see the point guard matchup and how the young freshman handles himself in this game against Duke with 31,000 fans in attendance inside the Dome. The other guy that you should keep your eye on is Marek Dolezaj. He's a jack of all trades for this team. He rebounds, he assists, he comes up with steals. He's got to stay in the game, though, because we saw at Clemson on Tuesday, he got in foul trouble. He fouled out with about 8 minutes to go, and Syracuse was not the same after that.
Definitely a couple of exciting players up there. And the Orange, they weren't really getting much respect nationally up until recently. How have they turned things around after that 1-3 start to ACC play?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, it starts with this was a young team. They only returned 1 starter from last year, and that was Elijah Hughes. Buddy Boeheim played a lot down the stretch of the season, but everybody else was pretty much brand new and in new roles. Even Elijah's in a new role as the leader of this team. Buddy's in a new role as one of the leading scorers. And I think it took them some time to figure things out. And I don't think they were ready for the trip to the Barclays Center when they took on Oklahoma State and Penn State, or the trip to Georgetown. And they got off to that 8-7 start, 1-3 in the conference, as you mentioned. And I think some of it is they just naturally got better. I think individually guys got better. Some of the young guys, Joe Girard's come into his own. Quincy Guerrier, the freshman off the bench, a freshman forward, has come into his own. He's been more aggressive. Marek Dolezaj has been more aggressive. And I think from a team perspective, they've evolved as well. They were very much live by the 3, die by the 3 at the beginning of the season. Now they're getting to the basket a little bit more. They're doing a better job on the glass. They're holding their own down low. They're a little more physical than they were earlier in the season. So I think some of it is they were super young and they're figuring it out. And I also think just individual guys have gotten better. And now they seem to know what it takes to win in this ACC conference.
That'd be a scary nice squad if they could stay together for a few years. Now, we can't let you get out of here without talking just a little bit more about Syracuse last game. I know it was a loss. Don't hate me for it. But the Orange, man, they'd won 5 in a row before losing by just 1 stinking point to Clemson on Tuesday. What stopped the Orange from picking up 6 straight W's?
It was really 2 things, and we've already touched on those things, but it was foul trouble. They had both of their big guys foul out. Marek Dolezaj fouled out with 8 minutes to go. Barama Sidibe, their starting center, fouled out with over 5 minutes to go. And they had to insert Jesse Edwards, an unproven freshman, into the game down the stretch. He played the final 5 minutes, did the best he could. But, again, he's not Barama, he's not Marek, and they struggled in that area. The other problem was rebounding. They were -10 on the glass, and we touched on that a little bit earlier as well, that when this team gets beaten badly on the boards, they tend to lose the game. It went right down to the wire. Clemson made a play with 2 seconds to go to take the lead. Syracuse unable to respond, unable to hit a desperation 3. And now they move on to this Duke game. It's a great opportunity. Syracuse does not have a win over a top 50 opponent this season. Duke would obviously fall into that category, a top 10 opponent coming to town. 31,000 fans plus inside the Dome Saturday. Should be a lot of fun.
That one should be a ton. Steve, thanks for everything. We know you're going to be watching that showdown between the Orange and the Blue Devils Saturday night. That is Steve, everybody. We'll look forward to hearing from him much more next week. And UNC looking to turn their season around after losing 5 in a row. The Tar Heels have now won 2 straight, including a win over their close rivals NC State on Monday. But NC State is heading in the other direction. The Wolfpack's loss to UNC was their 2nd straight. WNCN's Alyssa Ray and Todd Gibson were both in the stands to watch the big showdown in Raleigh. Fellas?
I'm Alyssa Ray at PNC Arena here with Todd Gibson. North Carolina beat NC State, and Gibby, on paper, this is an upset.
A little bit of an upset. NC State came in as a 7-point favorite, but everybody knows that Roy Williams just wears out the Wolfpack. 31-4 in his history at North Carolina against the Wolfpack. That's an amazing record we were talking about before the game. So really no surprise that North Carolina would win this game. But yeah, as you said, NC State came in as a slight favorite in this one. But North Carolina played a great game in the last one coming into it, so they had a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, they did, knocking off Miami by quite a few points. And of course, they got all the help from Garrison Brooks. Again, 25 points and 11 rebounds.
It's really exciting for us, and knowing how hard we were working and seeing guys play through injuries. I think it was a great win for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like everybody getting that swag. I mean, G has been amazing for us. B-Rob, KJ came in and played big minutes. Leaky looked good today. Everybody's just doing good, so it's just perfect.
It's a really tough place to play, and their fans are very rowdy, and there's a little bit of bad blood, I guess, between us, obviously. So, I mean, a win's a win, and it feels really good, but this one just feels a little bit sweeter.
And the Tar Heels also got some help from Armando Bacot, a double-double, 11 points, 11 rebounds. But, Gibby, for NC State, second straight loss.
Yeah, they won 3 in a row leading into this, and then 2 straight losses. The big win at Virginia. They had all kinds of momentum after those 3 wins, and then 2 straight losses. The guys after the game talked about their compete level. They were not happy with how they competed, very disappointed. In the locker room afterwards, they were just talking about the fact that they did not defend, didn't listen to the coach. I heard one of them say, too. That's never a good thing. So after the game, the guys talked about the compete level. It just wasn't there against the Tar Heels.
I feel like we just didn't compete at the level that we needed to. You know, they didn't do anything special. They just played harder than us. They got the energy plays. I feel like we broke down on defense, and yeah, we just didn't bring it tonight.
And I felt we were the better team, and just like Coach said, we didn't finish the game how we were supposed to finish it, and so it's a tough one for us.
Just staying locked in. We weren't focused all the way through. We didn't stay together the entire time on that court, and we let Garrison kill us. We let Armando get his average too. So once we lock in on tendencies and lock in on matchups, we'll be all right.
And again, a tough loss for the Wolfpack. Gibby, where does NC State go from here?
Well, the Pack are at the halfway point of the season in the ACC. 10 games left. They got some tough games left. 2 against Duke, Louisville in there as well. A couple of really tough games. They need to get it together, and they're a leading scorer. C.J. Bryce, 2 straight games of not scoring. You can't have your leading scorer and rebounder not scoring 2 straight games. Hopefully they'll turn it around, but they have some tough games left as we head down the stretch here in the ACC.
And speaking of a turnaround, North Carolina needed this win over NC State if they're trying to make a push for the NCAA tournament. Of course, lots of anticipation as to when Cole Anthony will return, so there is still hope for this Tar Heels squad. Covering North Carolina and NC State, for Todd Gibson, I'm Alyssa Ray. Chris, back to you.
Thank you both. Tar Heels going to look to keep that mo rolling when they host Boston College Saturday at 6, but it gets a lot tougher after that one. Quick turnaround, 7 p.m. tip Monday night in Tallahassee against the up-and-coming Florida State Seminoles. NC State having a tough time reversing their 2-game losing streak. They host the 6th-ranked Louisville Cardinals Saturday. That one's at 2, and after that, 3 straight on the road, starting with Miami on Wednesday. That one tips off at 8:30. Virginia Tech had a handle on 4th place in the ACC this time last week, but after a pair of losses, the Hokies are now an even 5-5 in conference. As WFXR's Jermaine Farrell reports, the long road trips may have had an effect on Tech.
The Virginia Tech Hokies looking good entering last week's action, sitting at 5-3 in ACC play. Tech hit the road for what we all would consider a pair of winnable ACC games. Those road games, however, the longest as far as distance when you look at the ACC map. First up, seeking their 6th straight win over Boston College, the Virginia Tech men's basketball team came up short 61-56 against the Eagles at the Conti Forum Saturday afternoon. Now looking for their 15th win of the season and 2nd straight ACC victory, the Hokies had that setback on the road against the Eagles. This was Tech's first loss in Chestnut Hill since 2013 and their first loss to Boston College since 2015. Despite the loss, redshirt freshman Landers Nolley led the way for Tech with 15 points. He was a team leader in points for the 13th time this season. Freshman Naheem Aline added 10 points, and guard Tyrese Radford grabbed 9 rebounds.
You know, we get time and time again. We were awfully sloppy with some of those movements, and you know, that all contributes to what transpired this afternoon.
Now the Hokies staying on the road, looking for a 4th ACC road win on the season. As the Virginia Tech men's basketball team, they had a 71-61 setback against Miami Tuesday at the Watsco Center. The Hokies fell to Miami on the road for the first time since 2018. The Hurricanes, they snapped a 3-game losing streak against Tech, including a 71-56 loss in the ACC tournament last season. Bright spot for the Hokies guard Tyrese Radford. He recorded his career high in points with 24 points, shooting 75% from the field. Redshirt freshman Landers Nolly added 14 points along with 5 rebounds.
We're not quite right here. We're in a bit of a rut on both ends of the floor, to be honest, and get back home and figure it out.
Now with the 2 consecutive losses, the Hokies, they fall to 14-7 overall. They are 5-5 in the ACC. We're at the midpoint of the ACC season. Remember, there are 20 league games. So we're at the halfway point, and that Tech will return to action as they get a much-needed home game in Blacksburg. But it'll be a tough test. They'll face the 5th-ranked Florida State Seminoles Saturday at 4 at Castle Coliseum. Then they hit the road Tuesday night, going to the ATL for a game at Georgia Tech. Covering the Virginia Tech Hokies, I'm Jermaine Farrell.
Good stuff as always, Jermaine. Thank you. The Canes went over Virginia Tech first in 5 games. They'll try to make it 2 in a row at Pitt on Sunday at noon. Then Miami heads back home to take on NC State on Wednesday. That one is at 8:30. And Notre Dame, believe it or not, just a few points away from having a completely different record. The Irish lost by 2 to Syracuse, then came up just short of Florida State, losing to the Noles by 1. But as WTTV's Chris Widlick reports, Notre Dame was able to bounce back against Wake Forest. Chris?
If Notre Dame is to make a push for the NCAA tournament, they've got to win a week in the ACC. And if you ask head coach Mike Brey, that might not be possible, but not because of his team's effort. So far, it's yet to happen. Wednesday's win at the Joyce Center over Wake Forest was a solid performance, 90-80 over the Demon Deacons, behind 23 from TJ Gibbs and another double-double from John Mooney. The Irish led virtually wire-to-wire, and it was an impressive bounce back from Heartbreak Hotel in Tallahassee over the weekend. The Domers led 5th-ranked Florida State by 11 early, but a barrage of Seminole triples gave the home team the edge. Notre Dame had a few shots to win at the end, but fell short 85-84. Prentice Hub led the way with 24, but Mike Brey questioned a traveling call and a technical on the Irish bench afterwards.
We're treated by the officials like we haven't brought football as a full member, but yet we get a full share of the ACC network TV. Are you kidding me? He tees up our bench from across the court because he's off at us. I'm frustrated, man. And I tip of the cap to Florida State. They make great plays. I love Leonard. He's a good friend, and they're a great team. You got to be kidding me, man. Come on, man. We're in the league, too. We're in the league, too, now. Come on. Come on, John Gaffney. God. Congratulations, Florida State. You're fearless. Great team. They can win it.
Brey at his best. I love him. The Irish host Georgia Tech Saturday before Pitt comes to South Bend next week. A chance to string together some wins. Covering the Fighting Irish, I'm Chris Widlick.
Thanks a lot there, Chris. Pricey presser. That cost him 20 grand for saying that, by the way. Notre Dame is in the middle of a 3-game home stand. They're going to welcome Georgia Tech to South Bend on Saturday at noon, and then Pittsburgh comes to town on Wednesday. That one tips off at 6:30. Wake Forest is going to try to pick up a win at home when they face off against Clemson on Saturday at 8, and then it's a tough trip to the KFC Yum Center where the Deacons take on Louisville. That one's on Wednesday at 9. All right, let's take a look at the standings here as we wrap up the month of January. 3 teams are separating themselves at the top, but one team is now starting to pull ahead even further. You guessed it, Louisville is on top at 9-1. Behind them, both Florida State and Duke 7-2, putting them a few games and a half back of the Cardinals. And then things start to get a little congested in the middle there. Virginia and Syracuse 6-4, which is even 3 games back of the lead. Then Virginia Tech, NC State, Clemson, all even at 5-5. Another 3 teams are 4-6. You got Pitt, Boston College, Georgia Tech, all trying to pull themselves up to 500. UNC and Notre Dame, both a half game behind those teams at 3-6. Miami, 1 step below that. They're 3-7. Wake Forest on the bottom of that pile, unfortunately. They're 2-8, but hopefully looking up there. Those 3 teams at the top of the standings each face a tricky road test this Saturday, so you're not going to want to miss next week's chase for the championship. No. We're going to be taking a close look at Louisville's tries to stay on top of the ACC when they take a trip to NC State 2, about the time that one's wrapping up, Florida State's going to tip off in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. And you're going to have a bit of a break to grab some dinner before Duke squares off against Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. That one tips off at 7. I'll say thanks for everybody for joining us for Chase for the Championship. Remember, you can watch a new episode every Thursday night at 7. And until next week, man, get out there and watch some basketball. See you next Thursday.